I'm Joe Gigliotti, PhD, and I am your guide for this journey you are about to embark on. Now, to survive here in this generation, you're going to have to know a few things. Come along for the ride. I will show you how to live. Of How to Live. I am your professor, Joe Gigliotti, PhD. And today we are going to teach you a very important lesson, yet another very important lesson, how to be considerate. Now there are many features or aspects that go into how to be considerate because, well, nobody likes a brute, a jerk, a bully. So, today class, first what we're going to teach you is something not to be, and that is ill. Well, don't be ill either. We don't want you to be sick. But as far as consideration is concerned, don't be ill, mannered, ill-mannered.
Once upon a time, in a certain little town, on a street that had beautiful poplar trees growing along each side of it, was a nice little house. Johnny, who had brown eyes, ears that stood out a little like this, a nose that turned up slightly, that always had a happy smile. I said the mouth always had a happy smile. That's better. Now, as well as having a head, of course, arms and legs and a body, just like other little boys. And when they were all put together, Johnny looked like this. Well, now that you know what Johnny looks like, I know you'll want to hear about a very peculiar thing that happened to him one day. The sun was peeping in his window and was getting ready to wake him up. But look at that sun. He looks a bit disgusted at what he sees in Johnny's room. And no wonder. We didn't want to tell you this, but Johnny's a terribly untidy little boy. Did you ever see such an untidy room? His mother had asked him so many times to hang up his clothes and put away his toys. And like all little boys, he had a good self who told him the right things to do. And he knew he should hang up his pajamas. But like most little boys, Johnny also had a bad self. And I don't know why, but Johnny seemed to prefer to listen to this bad self, who told him,
"Don't be a sissy. Throw your pajamas on the floor."
And the bad self won. Too bad. Now, of course, the bathroom's nice and clean and tidy. Johnny's mother keeps it that way. But does Johnny help her? Well, not exactly. But his good self tells him he knows he doesn't have to have fun that way. It makes his mother very unhappy. And good self might have won his argument if that bad self had not come up with the old argument.
"Ah, don't be a sissy,"
he told Johnny.
"Make all the mess you want. And why? Just splash a little water on yourself and dry it off. Nobody'll know the difference. And what's the good of cleaning your teeth? Unless, of course, you could have some fun with the toothpaste."
But wait, cried good self. Stop. Just look at the mess you've made. You'll get worse and worse. If you don't mend your ways, you'll turn into a pig for sure, just as your mother said. "Pig," snorted Johnny. "Ah, don't be silly." But even as he hurried off to breakfast, his hands and feet became little pig's trotters. And though good self knew this was bound to happen, he was very sad to see such a nice little boy making such a pig of himself. Of course, bad self was just tickled pink, another one over on him. As Johnny rushed into breakfast, he had no idea that his hands and feet were, you know what. But then why should he? With table manners like this. His mother, of course, was most unhappy to see him slurp and spill his food this way. But Johnny paid no attention to what she said. He thought he was a regular fellow. He had the mistaken idea that being neat and well-mannered was like being a sissy. That was why when his good self popped up to remind him that all this bad behavior was going to lead nowhere, Johnny gave him an argument. "Ah," said Johnny. And of course no polite little boy says "ah" in just that way. "I don't want to be polite. I want to be a ball player or a soldier." "Well, you won't be either one," said good self. "You'll just be a pig." This pig business was beginning to worry Johnny, and for a moment he began to wonder if he'd better change his ways.
Don't be silly,
said bad self, popping into the picture again.
What does it matter how you eat as long as you eat plenty to make you strong?
Now that sort of reasoning seemed to appeal to Johnny, and he continued to eat as rudely as ever. "Be careful," said good self. "You're going too far."
Ah, hurry up,
said bad self.
"Show him you're boss around here."
Then Johnny licked his plate and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "He's getting to be more and more of a pig," murmured good self. This, of course, was just what bad self wanted. He knew he could get Johnny into even worse trouble if he could just get good self out of the way. "Look out!" Too late. As soon as Johnny got outside the house, he ran as fast as he could to the baseball field. And as he approached the field, he saw that the game had already started. This made him very angry because his bad manners and his rudeness had, quite naturally, made him also a very selfish little boy. "Give me the bat," he said to Tommy. "I want to bat first." The other boys could hardly believe that one of their friends could be such a bad sport and such a bully. "Don't be a pig," they called. "See, even your friends think you're a pig," said good self. "And no wonder. Snatching the bat away from little Tommy is the most terrible thing you've done yet."
"Ah, why not take the bat?"
shouted bad self.
"You're bigger than he is, aren't you?"
"Right," said Johnny the pig. "Let's get on with the game." But the tale doesn't end here. "Play ball!" shouted Johnny. Mickey threw a fast one. Wham! And the ball sailed through the air. As Johnny ran, touched first base, and rushed on, the ball was thrown into Billy, who caught it on second base. "You're out!" shouted Billy. And Johnny was out by a mile. But Johnny didn't like that. He didn't want to be out. "I'm not out! I'm not out!" he screamed at Billy. Poor Billy just blinked. Anybody could see that Johnny was out by a mile. Billy started to explain it, but he just got pushed around for his trouble. Well, that was more than the other boys could stand. They were all good sports, and like all regular fellows, they couldn't stand a bully or someone who wanted his own way all the time. They told Johnny he was a big bully. "You're nothing but a pig," they said. Naturally, they wouldn't have anything more to do with him. "Would you?" "Humph," said Johnny. "They all say I'm a pig. They're crazy." That's what Johnny said. But do you think they were crazy? Bad self laughed and laughed as he saw what he'd done to Johnny. Good self decided it was time to do something about it. As for Johnny, he began to feel pretty unhappy. All his friends had left him, and he had that empty feeling that everyone gets when they've been terribly selfish. There was nothing for him to do but go home. On his way, he passed a farmyard where there were some little pigs. He couldn't stand the sight of them. He hurried on his way. He had no idea, of course, the pigs were following him until, "Oink, oink," they said right behind him. "Shoo, shoo," said Johnny to the pigs. Go on home." But the little pigs just stood there and smiled at him. They thought this was fun. They'd never seen a pig with clothes on. Johnny was pretty worried by this time, so he started to run. The pigs ran right behind him. So he ran faster. And the faster Johnny ran, the faster the pigs ran. So Johnny ran still faster. He'd never run so fast before. Puffing and blowing, he arrived at last at his home. swung in the gate, and slammed it shut. Only then did he feel safe from those terrifying little pigs. In the garden, he found his little dog, Rover, lying asleep under a bush, waiting for him. Johnny smiled again. Let his friends call him a pig. Let them walk away from him. Rover was a true friend. Rover wouldn't let him down. "Hi, Rover," he called. The dog awakened as soon as he heard that familiar sound. "Oh, boy," said Rover to himself. "Johnny's here to play with me." And off he ran to greet his little master. "Whoa," said Rover. "What is that funny-looking thing that sounds like Johnny?" Rover decided he didn't know. But whatever it was, he didn't like it. He ran like a flash with howls of dismay, sped like a rocket toward the bushes, and disappeared. Cautiously, he peeped out and blinked. Johnny tried hard to stop a tear from rolling down his cheek. This was the hardest blow of all. Little Rover, whom he'd raised from a pup, with whom he'd romped and played for years, had deserted him. He could stand everything else, but this was too much. He would have to find his mother. Would she run away from him? He'd been very rude and very disobedient. Yes, he'd better see his mother. On the way through the hall, Johnny passed the mirror. Huh? Who was that? Who was that funny-looking creature? He looked at it this way. He looked at it that way. And he looked at it the other way. "Oh, it's me, Sovereign Catfish! Ma!" he yelled. Now he really had to find his mother quickly. "Oh, Mother," he said, "I've turned into a pig. No one will have anything to do with me, not even Rover. Oh, Mother, I've turned into a pig." "Well, of course you have," said his mother. "You've turned into a pig because you preferred to act like one." "I didn't want to be a pig," said Johnny. I just don't want to be a sissy." "So that's it," his mother said. "You're afraid of being a sissy. Well, just let me show you something." And she turned on the movie projector. "Do you know who those men are?" asked Johnny's mother. "Sure, they're West Point cadets," answered Johnny. "That's right. And see how smartly they march. Notice how clean and well-kept their uniforms are. Do you think they're sissies?" "Well, no," Johnny agreed they couldn't be sissies. Then said his mother, "If the future generals of the United States can keep clean, you should too." Johnny thought about that and agreed it was probably so. But he added, "If I had a uniform like that and were a West Point cadet, I would naturally keep myself clean." Said his mother. "Things like that just don't happen. These young men earned the right to be cadets by being clean and well-mannered first. You can't change from being dirty and bad-mannered into being clean and well-mannered all of a sudden." "You can't?" And Johnny seemed worried. "Well," said his mother, "if you made up your mind to try very hard, perhaps you could." In the academy and the barracks rooms where they live, the cadets study hard and practice being orderly, clean, and tidy. These young men know that without good manners, they will never be good officers. And it's the same thing at Annapolis, where Uncle Sam trains his naval officers. Nobody leans on the table or slurps his food here. Here's the Navy football squad. But good manners are not forgotten on the playing field. The men learn to tackle hard and to tackle fairly. And how to kick, and how to develop their muscles. But they also learn that while it is important to win, it doesn't matter if they lose as long as they've played their best and can lose with a smile. Watch this man score, and remember that good sportsmanship is something that everyone admires, and good sportsmanship is acting to others the way you would like them to act to you. So remember, Johnny, if you want to play ball like this and get a cheer like this, play fair, play for the team, and never, never act like a pig. "Oh, boy," said Johnny, "that was a wonderful movie. Now I know exactly what to do. Well, said his mother, now's the time to begin then. Because once you've made up your mind to do something, you must act immediately. As Johnny rushed away, you could see that he felt better already. He ran up the stairs as fast as he could and entered his room. No wonder I turned into a pig, he said as he looked around. Quickly, he gathered up all his clothes he'd left scattered around and hung them up neatly in his closet, just as he'd seen the cadets do. Then he picked up and put away his toys in the toy box. On the way out, he paused at the door to see if everything was shipshape, as the midshipman would say. And as he looked around the clean and tidy room, he felt happier than he'd ever felt before. Suddenly, he noticed that his pig's trotters were once more his own hands and feet. "Oh, boy," he exclaimed, "I'm turning into a little boy again." And he was so encouraged that he hurried even faster to get on with the job. In the bathroom, he hung up each towel in its place, put everything back where it belonged, and yes, sir, he even put the cap back on the toothpaste. "Yes, sir," said Johnny. "I must admit that certainly is an improvement." So he thought it was time to see if he showed any improvement. And sure enough, he could see a lot of changes for the better. Now, nothing could stop him. A fella couldn't become a cadet or a midshipman all of a sudden. He wondered why he hadn't realized that before. At lunchtime, Johnny sat up straight at the table as he'd been taught to do, arranged his napkin properly, and instead of reaching for the food, asked his mother to pass it for him. This time there was no slurping or spilling or splashing of food. Johnny was eating like a little gentleman and proud of the fact that he knew how to do so. "Johnny," said Good Self, popping up again, "you look more and more like yourself." Johnny grinned as he wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Just remember," continued Good Self, "that any drip can be a pig. It takes a smart guy not to be one." "Roger," said Johnny. And what do you know? His pig's ears disappeared.
"Don't be a dope,"
cried Bad Self.
"You're to have more fun taking my advice. Do you want to be a sissy?"
"Being polite and well-mannered is not being a sissy," said Johnny. "Listening to you doesn't get a fella anywhere." And he dropped Bad Self into the sugar bowl. "Good for you," cried Good Self as Johnny excused himself and left the table. And just in case Bad Self should cause any more trouble, he jumped on the lid and sat on it. "Well," said Good Self, "that takes care of that." And it certainly seemed to. When Johnny arrived at the ball game, the boys were not a bit pleased to see him. "Hi, fellas," said Johnny. But the fellas hardly said a word. The boys expected trouble. But Johnny went over to little Tommy and said, "Here, use my new bat." Then he went over to Jimmy and said, "Here, try my new mitt." "Well, what do you make of it?" Ted asked Bobby. "I don't know," answered Bobby. "But if he wants to play fair, we'll let him play." As the game got going, the boys were more than glad to have Johnny playing with them. He was always on the job, and he played for the team. But when it came Johnny's turn at bat, a shiver of excitement ran through all the boys. So far, Johnny'd been a good sport. How would he act now? The ball came sailing fast and straight toward the plate. Bam! Johnny socked it with all his might, and the ball went winging way, way, way over the field. It looked like a home run for sure. Johnny went zipping around the bases, and as he passed third base, the ball was fielded. The fielder fumbled with it for a moment, then threw it into home base. And Johnny and the ball seemed to arrive at the same moment. "You're out," shouted Jimmy in great excitement. And this time the boys were ready in case Johnny put up another argument. But they didn't know our new Johnny. "Shake," said Johnny to Jimmy. "That was a good catch. I thought I was safe, but I was too busy running to see. If you say I'm out, I'm out." That's the kind of sportsmanship the boys like to see. And they were so happy to see Johnny a good sport again, they cheered him all around the field. And because he was, they then and there elected him captain of the team. Well, of course, there was no pig left in Johnny, so his snout disappeared, too. "Hooray for our side," said Good Self. "I knew you'd do it." Then Johnny home as fast as he could go, leaped over the garden fence and found Rover waiting for him. Good old Rover was overjoyed after looking like a man, and grinning as only a dog can grin, followed Johnny as he'd always done. "Mother, Mother," called Johnny as he came bounding into the house. "What is it?" she said. "I just want to tell you," said Johnny, "that it's
Okay, now that you know not to be ill-mannered, we'll teach you something that we do want you to be and that you should be if you want to know how to live here in this generation. And that is this word? Courteous.
We are visiting room 10 to see an exhibit on courtesy. May I present Mrs. Anderson and her son Bill, who is in the class. They too have come to watch to see if the people actually display courtesy. Watch how Pete and Marion act as host and hostess. They know that courtesy means showing respect, thinking of the other person, real friendliness. When Pete mentions the neat job Bill did on the exhibit, Bill is pleased. That's courtesy at work. You can see, too, that everyone in the class must have done a great deal of thinking about courtesy and much work to prepare these posters and the rest of the exhibit. Bill is especially proud of his part in the exhibit. The artwork on this large poster, ways to show that we are thinking of other people. We help to make our meetings with other people courteous by using such words as please. Whenever we ask for anything, it shows our friendliness and courtesy if we ask with please. On the other hand, thank you is a simple way to repay those who do things for you. Another expression we need all the time is excuse me. It lets other people know that you are thinking of them when you say excuse me. Still, another way to smooth your meetings with other people is may I. If you must interrupt, 2 words will show that you mean well. Simply, may I? Notice how pleasant and thoughtful Mrs. Anderson is as she expresses interest in Bill's ideas on the poster. Bill graciously shares the credit with his classmates. It was a joint project, he explains, during their study of courtesy. While Pete and Marion posed, Bill sketched the action.
Please.
With that sketch finished, ready for final artwork, Pete got ready to play the guest for the next pose. Marion was the hostess, offering him a cookie.
Thank you.
Pete showed that he appreciated her kindness. For the next demonstration, they needed another chair to make a sofa, and they needed a telephone. Joan played the other girl in conversation with Marion. Marion had to interrupt to answer the phone.
Please excuse me.
She was pleasant and courteous as she excused herself. In the next pose, Marion had something important to say, or else she wouldn't have interrupted.
May I?
Marion is considerate of her friends. Besides these examples of courtesy, there are others. For instance, Mrs. Anderson's way of constructive suggestion. And notice how Bill begins his reply.
It's really quite good, Bill. But don't you think these courteous ways can be used in more than just these 4 situations?
Oh, yes, you're right, Mother. That's why we put the captions on the poster. We need them all the time.
Yes, we do need these simple expressions all the time to show that we are thinking of the other person. On the table is a scrapbook, especially prepared for the exhibit. It also showed consideration of the other person. The exact form of an invitation letter may vary, but this is an example.
Dear parents, an exhibit of our schoolwork and courtesy will be held in room 10 of the Sunnyside School on May 29th from 7:30 to 9 p.m. We hope you can come. Your friends, the class of room 10.
Notice the details about place, date, and time, as well as a few words of cordial invitation. This type of invitation needs no acceptance, but the class prepared an example of one for their scrapbook.
Dear friends, we thank you very much for the invitation to your exhibit in room 10 of the Sunnyside School on May 29 from 7:30 to 9 p.m. We shall be pleased to see your work on courtesy. Sincerely yours, your parents.
A letter of acceptance shows all the same details to be sure they are correct. There is also a sample letter of regret,
stating why the person could not accept. On the next few pages of the scrapbook are drawings and poems Pete had made about courtesy when using the telephone. Answer promptly. Don't keep the other person waiting. Friendliness is one of the main parts of courtesy. It saves time and makes your conversation more pleasant if you speak distinctly. It's courteous to be brief. Someone else may want to use the telephone. So much for the scrapbook. Over here is a poster that another student made. Be a good listener. It pleases the speaker to know you are really interested in him. And then, too, you can learn much by listening carefully. Mrs. Anderson is being a good listener now, isn't she? And then there's the matter of introductions. How will Bill introduce his mother and his teacher?
Mother, may I present Miss Barton, our teacher?
See how Bill shows respect to his mother by mentioning her first. Because she is the older woman, he presents Miss Barton to her. And he helps their conversation get started by explaining who Miss Barton is.
It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Anderson. Bill has told me how much he enjoys your class. He's learned so much about courtesy. How did you teach him to make such a polite introduction?
Perhaps Bill should explain that, Mrs. Anderson.
Well, in our practice in class, we learned that introducing people was just a matter of showing respect. Marion, I'd like to introduce my friend Pete.
Bill mentioned the girl's name first and showed respect by presenting the boy to her. You can mention either name first with two boys of the same age.
Bill, this is Pete. Pete Dalton, Bill Anderson.
How do you do, Bill? Hello, Pete.
So the poster that grew out of this practice is included in the exhibit. And that's how the class learned that introductions are really easy. Just remember to show respect. Besides showing respect, your introductions can help the conversation to begin. Notice how Bill's mother introduces her friends, Mr. and Mrs. Hall.
Mrs. Hall, this is Miss Barton, the teacher in this room. Mrs. Hall is Joan Hall's mother.
Miss Barton, as hostess, offers her hand. Next, Mr. Hall is presented to Miss Barton. And finally, Bill is presented to Mr. and Mrs. Hall. Remember the order? There's a technique to shaking hands. No one likes to have his hand crushed by a bear, nor to clasp one like this, sometimes referred to as dead fish. And so the introductions have been completed, and the group settles down to friendly conversation. Well, it's time to go now. What have you seen here? That is, what have you seen besides the posters and scrapbooks of the exhibit? As you watch the host and hostess, their pleasant manner standing at the door to thank their guests for coming, as you see the guests reply graciously, you realize that it's the simple things, being friendly, thinking of the other person, and showing respect that make up everyday courtesy. Real living courtesy has made the evening a pleasure and a success.
Alrighty then. Now that you know how to be courteous, what we will cover next is a little bit in the mind game, if you will. Now, nobody likes somebody that doesn't seem to know a thing. I mean, they have to repeat themselves all the time, and just they feel superior. So we want you to be intelligent as well. We want you to have insight. Yes, we want you to be insightful.
Thoughtfulness? Everybody tells me to be more thoughtful. Well, I'd like to be more thoughtful. If I only knew what it meant.
Why should I worry about being thoughtful? What'll it get me? In this world, it's every man for himself.
How do you go about being thoughtful? What do you do? Every time I try, I only make things worse. Is there some particular method of being thoughtful that works every time?
Yes, everywhere you go, people talk about thoughtfulness. Well, just what does thoughtfulness mean? How does it fit into your everyday life? To discover some know-how about thoughtfulness, let's follow Jane Proctor into her home. For the Proctors are one family who have learned the art of thoughtfulness. If we watch carefully, we'll see just what thoughtfulness is, why the Proctors think it is worth the effort, and how they do it.
Mom! Oh, Mom!
She's not here, Jane.
Oh, hi, Eddie.
Mom's downtown.
Oh?
She left a note if you want to read it.
She always leaves a note. Dear Jane and Eddie, I've gone downtown to pay the insurance premium. Please take... Say, something's funny. Mom doesn't usually take care of the family business. Please take the ground beef out of the freezing compartment so it will be ready for supper.
Ground beef, I forgot.
I'll get it. Hello? Oh, hello, Amy. He's right here. I'll take care of the meat.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, Amy. All set for the party tomorrow night?
Well, that takes care of the... Eddie, what happened to you?
Amy's grandmother is sick. I have to visit her over the weekend.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hope she gets better right away. But tomorrow night, the party, you'll miss it.
That's what I mean. Too late to ask another girl now. Well, it'll be tough on Amy, too.
I wish I could help. But tomorrow night... Tomorrow night? I've got to do something about a dress.
You girls have one-track minds. I haven't a thing to wear. I thought Mom was going to fix up the blue dress. The one you used to say was a dream.
Used to say it's right. Now it's a nightmare.
Oh, well, it's a dress. You'll manage. Say, your things are all over the place. Why don't you pick up?
Oh, and I forgot to straighten my room this morning. That was thoughtless of me.
Take your jacket along. Save a trip.
Yeah, and the books, too. Let's see. Jacket, book, scarf, upstairs. First straighten the sofa pillow.
That's the way. Better than wasting time flying from one thing to the next. I'll get your book.
Eddie, you know Mom will most likely be late. Let's get supper ready. What do you say?
Thought you had to straighten your room.
Oh, don't worry, I will.
Here's your jacket, too.
Listen, if you peel the potatoes and set the table, I'll do the rest.
Good deal.
I'll take your books, too.
Thanks.
Well, it's nice to see you working. Well, you better put an apron on, though.
All right. Say, what are we going to have to eat?
Let's see. Mashed potatoes, ground beef patty, salad.
Put lots of onion in my ground beef, will ya?
Uh-huh. You like lots of onions. But Dad doesn't like any.
No? How do you know that?
Oh, I don't know. I just seem to notice little things people like and dislike. It's kind of handy when you want to do something for someone you like.
I can see that. Yeah. But I don't think I could learn to do it, though.
Why, Eddie, you do. I'll bet when you meet a new girl, you notice everything she likes, so you can be nice to her. Well, you can do the same thing with your family. Marlene Davis.
Huh?
The new girl at school. She's in your English class, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. She is. What about her?
Well, they just moved into town the other day. She won't have a date for tomorrow night either. You two should get together.
Yeah. That's a swell idea. Aw, I can't ask a girl this late.
Why not? It's no reflection on her that she hasn't a date. It'd be the thoughtful thing to do. I bet she'd be glad for the chance to get acquainted.
Well, I guess it would be thoughtful to introduce her to the others. But, well, it just won't be easy to ask her. Well, I'll go out and set the table now. Information? I'd like the number of the Davis family, please. They just moved in. No, never mind.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Mom.
Here it is.
Hi, Eddie. Hi, Dad. Boy, I'm sure glad you got it. She's out in the kitchen now. You can take it upstairs.
Oh, Eddie, you got the best of this deal. Is the table all set?
Almost. Give a fella a chance, will ya? Boy, Dad, I'm sure glad Mom got it. Just wait till Jane sees it.
What's the matter, Eddie? You look worried.
Amy can't go to the party tomorrow night. There's another girl I could ask, but...
You think it'd be a bit late for asking anyone, eh?
Oh, that isn't it, Dad. I mean... Well, Marlene's just new in town, and I think she'd understand the late part of it all right, if I explained.
Well, then, how would you feel if you were in her place?
I guess I'd be glad to go.
That's a pretty good test, son. Put yourself in the other person's place.
Maybe you're right, Dad. Besides, she's kind of nice. I'd like to get acquainted.
Well, now, you tell her that. She won't feel like second choice at all. Marlene? Well, Marlene's folks will want to meet you. Why don't you run down there after supper and meet her folks and explain the whole thing?
Good idea, Dad. I'll do it.
Eddie, look and see if the folks are coming yet.
They're here now, Seth.
Here? Oh, come help me then. Mash the potatoes. Do something. Oh.
Well, you're the last of them.
Well, I guess Mother and I can do the dishes.
Yes, it's certainly our turn after that nice dinner you fixed. Goodness, what a wonderful surprise that was.
The most fun was watching your faces when you saw dinner on the table.
Oh.
Yes, that made everything worthwhile. In fact, that's what makes thoughtfulness worthwhile. Well, I'll go out and start on my homework now.
Where'd you put it, Mom?
On her bed. She'll find it in a minute.
It's the one she wanted, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mom! Dad! Eddie!
She's found it. Come on.
Oh, Mom, Dad, it's beautiful. Oh, Eddie, look. Oh, so that's why you went downtown this afternoon. Mm-hmm. Insurance premium.
Look at my little sister. Is Jimmy a lucky fella?
Mm-hmm.
But how did you know? I mean, it's the very one I wanted.
Eddie seemed to know what you wanted. He insisted we get that particular one.
Eddie, you knew all the time.
Well, I saw you ogling it in the store window. I couldn't help see you were crazy over it.
And you said you didn't know how to be thoughtful.
Here, wipe your face. You think you're still chopping onions.
Eddie, what if Jimmy and I double dated with you and Marlene?
Yeah. Be swell that way.
Well, why don't you go over there and ask her now?
Yes, right now.
Okay, see you later, folks.
But now I'm really going upstairs to do my homework.
And we've got dishes to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we've got a pretty nice family.
A fine, thoughtful family.
All right, now that you know how to be insightful, we're going to teach you how to interact with folks. How do you do? Hello. How is your day going? Mine is going fine. Stuff like that. Yes, we are going to teach you in this lesson here social skills.
How do you do? How do you do? How do you do?
Please, just how do you do? That's one of the things this article brings out. If I want to get off to a smooth start with people, it's half the battle, I find. Well, maybe you'll understand why I feel that way if I tell you what happened to me last night. I got so mixed up and embarrassed. It was painful and quite unnecessary. Well, I was having a Coke with my next-door neighbor, Ann Woolsey. She's home from college for the holidays. And such fun. She makes everyone feel welcome. I was having a wonderful time listening to her tell all about her college experiences. Until I happened to look up and see Frank Norton and Bill Phillips come in. Frank's new in town. He's smooth. Everyone likes him. As for Bill, he's the type who usually puts his foot in it. Well-meaning, but sloppy, you know. I realized if they saw us, I'd have to introduce them to Ann, or Ann to them. Gosh, I thought, which is correct? By the time they did see us, I was in a dither. They kept right on coming, and I kept right on trying to recall the correct way to introduce everyone properly, and wishing I weren't so vague about such things. For a moment, I couldn't remember Ann's name. I stumbled around. Frank, I said, this is my friend. No, I mean, this is Ann meet Frank. Oh, dear, I said, I want you to get to know each other. This is Bill, I said. I felt so adolescent, such a little thing to get so mixed up and excited about. Right then and there, I decided it was high time I got the whole matter of introduction straight, so I'd never have to think twice about them again. On the way out, the feature article in this month's Modern Youth hit me between the eyes. The publishers must have had second sight when they put it in. I bought the magazine to do a little homework. And that's what I'm doing.
Well, we're all apt to make a boner now and then. Once you learn the basic rules, an accepted introduction isn't really so complicated, is it?
No, that's the point. It's simple. Look. Persons of opposite sex address the woman first.
I should think watching other people you know have the correct technique would help.
Exactly what this article says. I was thinking about a committee meeting at Frank Norton's house the other night. I didn't realize how well he handled those introductions. But as I look back on it, Miss Cameron, my teacher, Joan, and I were the first to arrive. The other two had never met Frank's parents. But I knew everyone there, so I said, "Good evening, Mrs. Norton."
Good evening, Peggy. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you. Then I stepped aside while Frank introduced the others.
Miss Cameron, this is my mother.
How do you do? I'm glad to meet you at last, Miss Cameron. Frank has talked about you so much and so favorably.
Mother, Joan Wood.
How do you do, Joan?
How do you do, Mrs. Norton?
Here's Father. Well, Peggy, how are you this fine evening?
I'm just fine, thank you, Dr. Norton.
I told you, Peggy, Bill would be along. Excuse me. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Hiya, Frank. How you doing?
You're late.
Oh, what's the difference?
Come on in and meet everybody.
Hey, Peggy.
Hello, Bill.
Sorry I'm late.
Dad, this is Bill Phillips. How do you do?
How do you do, sir?
Come on, Dad. We'll meet the others. Miss Cameron, this is my father. How do you do, Miss Cameron?
How do you do?
Dad, I want to introduce you to Joan Wood. How do you do?
How do you do?
Excuse me, please. Would you excuse Bill for a moment, please, Peggy?
Certainly.
Thank you. Mother, I'd like to introduce Bill Phillips.
How do you do? Frank tells me you're the captain of his basketball team.
Well, yes, I am, Mrs. Norton.
Well, it's been nice to see all of you. We'll leave you to your meeting now, if you will excuse us.
They then said goodbye to us all, and they left. You see, nobody squirmed at Frank's introductions. They were all so simple and right to the point.
We can all probably learn something from your experience. Just be sure you didn't miss anything.
We can compare both these occasions with some of the points in the article. Would that do it?
It should. Let's start with the one about speaking the woman's name first when introducing a man to her. Remember the mess you made of that one? You got all mixed up to start with. Your friends got the idea all right, but introductions like meet so-and-so or let me make you acquainted with so-and-so are considered awkward anyway. Let's see how Frank introduced his father to his teacher. Addressing the woman first, he said,
Miss Cameron, this is my father. How do you do, Miss Cameron?
How do you do? There is one exception to the rule. Did you notice?
Dad, I want to introduce you to Joan Wood.
Frank addressed his father first out of respect. Even here, he phrased the introduction so that he introduced the man to the girl. Let's have that one again.
Dad, I want to introduce you to Joan Wood.
Suppose Frank had wanted to introduce me to Joan. He could take his choice. It wouldn't matter, since both of us are of the same age and sex. Now, how about persons of the same sex? Here, Frank wanted to show Miss Cameron respect as a teacher and as a visitor in his home, so he addressed her first. He said simply,
Miss Cameron, this is my mother.
When he came to Joan and his mother, he addressed his mother first because she was the older of the two. He merely gave the name with a slight pause in between.
Mother, Joan Wood.
When Frank introduced Bill, he spoke to his father first because he was older.
Hey, Peggy.
Hello, Bill.
Sorry I'm late.
Dad, this is Bill Phillips. How do you do?
How do you do, sir?
Well, that takes care of introductions, but you can't leave the situation hanging there. There's the matter of answering them. Unless you have a very good reason for saying something else, stick to the accepted form and just say, how do you do? Not, how do you do? And not, how do you do? Just say it simply, like Miss Cameron did. How do you do? Frank's mother wanted to make her response to Miss Cameron a bit more personal, since she had heard about her before naturally.
Miss Cameron, this is my mother.
How do you do? I'm glad to meet you at last, Miss Cameron. Frank has talked about you so much.
This was another good way to acknowledge an introduction, wasn't it? Frank's mother mentioned something in common, so as to break the ice, as I remember.
How do you do? Frank tells me you're the captain of his basketball team.
Well, yes, I am, Mrs. Norton. It's a good policy to fix a person's name by making it a part of your response, as Frank's mother and Joan did.
Mother, Joan Wood.
How do you do, Joan? How do you do, Mrs. Norton?
Men do shake hands, but not as if approaching a time bomb or hand-to-hand combat.
Dad, this is Bill Phillips. How do you do?
How do you do, sir?
Just a comfortable, firm grasp is all that is necessary. Men do not shake hands with women unless the woman holds out her hand first. Remember? I said Bill was kind of sloppy about such things.
But since Bill was a stranger to Anne, she could have held out hers first, right?
Right. If Bill had been a stranger brought up purposely to meet her, she should offer her hand. The same rule holds for two girls.
It looks this time as if Bill did the right thing. He waited for Mrs. Norton to offer her hand.
Mother, I'd like to introduce Bill Phillips.
How do you do?
Yes, the woman always takes the initiative when it comes to shaking hands with a man.
What else?
How about rising? When should a man rise? When should a girl?
Oh, yes. Let me see. I'll have to dream up a situation. Imagine Frank sitting there where I was. Then imagine me bringing Joan to introduce him to her. Frank would rise the moment he realizes I'm bringing someone to be introduced to him. He would rise also if I brought Bill instead of Joan. And either time he'd look as if it were a pleasure, not a hardship. As for girls, well, Joan would have risen as soon as she was introduced to Frank's mother or father, if either of them had been standing.
Well, I guess that takes care of nearly everything.
It's all a matter of practice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a chance to put these rules into practice. A party at Frank's.
Oh, Peggy,
Yes?
wasn't there something in that article about how you carry out those basic rules?
You mean?
All the rules in the world won't make people glad to meet an automaton. It's the warmth in the greeting, the feeling you put behind it that counts.
Gosh, didn't I say anything about that? Why, that's the most important point of all.
How's Peggy getting along? A good student, Peggy. Learns quickly. Following those few basic rules pays off. Wait and see. It's fun to meet people when you feel at ease. What's more fun is the way people will enjoy meeting you. See? All's well that begins well.
Okay, now that you got those social skills down, we're going to teach you how to interact on an even level. Now, we need you to play evenly with everybody else and interact in order to be considerate. You don't want to always win and always take more than the other person. Yes, indeed, in this lesson, we're going to teach you just how to play fair.
This is a story about a chemistry that Herb bought for himself. His brother Billy. Let's all watch Billy and Herb and the chemistry set, and perhaps we'll learn some things about fair play. As you see this story, we want you to think about questions. Questions such as, what is fair play? Perhaps when the story is over, you'll want to talk about the... Now let's see what Herb's doing. He starts with two clear legs. Ah! It would be fun to do experiments like that. But Herb isn't going to let Billy try. Billy wants his dad to make Herb let him do it. He says Herb's not fair. And Dad thinks perhaps he'd better explain to Billy. Herb shares most of his things with Billy, but maybe it is fair for Herb to keep his own chemistry set and not let Billy play with it. After all, Billy is rather young, and he doesn't know how to use the chemistry things safely. He might break something or hurt himself. And Herb earned the set for himself, so he has a right to it. Do you think that's fair? What about it? To play fair, should Herb share the chemistry set? Well, Herb didn't share the set. He used it alone all evening. On Saturday morning, the boys usually help by doing the dishes, but what's this tug of war? It seems they want to dry them because neither wants to wash. Well, whose turn is it to wash the dishes? Herb's turn. Billy's turn. Taking turns is always fair, but here's another question to think about. How can Herb and Billy decide whose turn it is? Mother thinks it's fair to make a rule and follow it. She'll mark the turns on the calendar. Herb is older, so he will wash today while Billy dries, and next time it will be Billy's turn to wash the dishes. So Herb and Billy can play fair by taking turns and by obeying the rules. That's one way to play fair. Oh, Herb's cut his hand. Must have been on a sharp knife in the sink. Mother will have to clean the cut. And Billy has an idea. How about a bandage to keep the dirt out of the cut? Another way to play fair is to be helpful. Well, Billy has the bandages from the bathroom now, and... Herb's chemistry set. Herb said not to touch it, but... Oh, he's downstairs. He'll never find out. What do you think? Should Billy use Herb's chemistry set? Remember your answer to that question. Well, let's see how Billy makes out. My, those things look strange to Billy. Well, try this one. There. There. Now. Oh! No, Billy isn't hurt. Just stained with harmless chemical ink. But Herb's chemistry set. Ooh, Herb's waiting for the bandages. Here they are, to fix Herb's hand. But what about Billy's stained hand? Well, a little bandage like this will keep dirt out of Herb's cut. Herb's all right now. But Billy offers to wash and dry the dishes. To do both. Herb thinks he could help. But don't you suppose Billy sort of wants to do something for Herb to make up for the chemistry accident? Herb says, all right, it's a good chance to work with the chemistry set. Uh-oh. Herb will find out about the broken test tube. But Mother thinks the cut heals a bit, and she goes back to finish her work. Now Herb remembers that it's time for Billy's favorite program, and he offers to get the station for Billy. After all, Herb wants to play fair,
I noticed today that...
With lots of fresh milk and fruit so you'll grow big and strong. And now, back to the adventures of Mary and Eddie. When we last saw our young friends, the captain had just landed their rocket plane on the surface of the moon. But Billy isn't really listening to the radio, is he? He has too much to think about. Herb has been playing fair with Billy, and Billy ought to play fair, too. He ought to tell Herb about the chemistry set. And that won't be easy. Besides, maybe Billy ought to buy a new test tube for Herb. But Billy has only a little money saved. He'd been planning to buy some marbles, and if he buys the test tube for Herb, he won't have enough left to buy his marbles. What should Billy do? To play fair, should Billy buy the marbles or the test tube? Well, Billy decides he will play fair. And after he tells Herb, Billy will go up and clean up the mess he's left in Herb's room. So Billy buys a new test tube, and there's Herb's chemistry set, just as good as new. Herb is pleased that Billy played fair. Of course, Billy will have to wait for his new marbles, but he feels better this way. And do you know what Herb decides? He's going to let Billy use the chemistry set some of the time, and he'll teach Billy how to do it safely. That is, if Father and Mother agree. Why, of course, they're glad that Herb and Billy have learned to play fair. Herb and Billy are glad, too. And what have we learned about fair play? To play fair, when should we share things? How do we decide whose turn it is? Should we respect the property of other people? What should we do to make up for our mistakes? What is fair play?
Okay, now that you know how to play fair, we're going to teach you another very important lesson when it comes to being considerate. And that, my good folks, is being thoughtful.
On this bright summer day, an express truck is stopping in front side the truck. There's a big box which the express man is delivering to Jimmy's family. As we watch what happens to the box, we're going to find out many things about sharing with others. Do you know what we mean by sharing? Do you know what kinds of things we share? Do you know why we share and how we share? Let's find out. Here's Jimmy to answer the doorbell. Isn't he surprised to see such a big box? It's from his grandfather who lives in a city hundreds of miles away. Now, what do you suppose is in it? Here's Jimmy's mother. Jimmy will get a hammer to open the box while Mother signs the receipt for it. Just think, this express man is but one of many people who have shared in the work of bringing the box here from the faraway city where Grandfather lives. That's one kind of sharing, isn't it? Mother certainly is happy to receive the box. Jimmy's happy, too. Now he shares in the work of opening the box. Let's see what's in it. Oh, new books. Jimmy and his mother and father will share these books. They'll read and enjoy them together. So it's only fair that Jimmy should share in the work of unpacking them. It's like this with everything in Jimmy's family. He shares in its pleasures, and he shares in the work. Before long, the box is empty. Doesn't work go quickly when you share it? And it's fun working together. Jimmy thinks the box would make a fine lemonade stand. Mother thinks so, too. Jimmy could set it up in front of the house. Mother helps Jimmy take it out. This is another way to share work, isn't it? The lemonade stand will be fun, but there's another thing Jimmy must think about. He promised his father he'd weed the flower garden today. Jimmy decides there'll be plenty of time to pull the weeds after he has set up the lemonade stand. Mother offers to make some lemonade while Jimmy fixes up the stand. Lemonade, 3 cents. Well, it didn't take long for Jimmy to set himself up in business with his mother's help. Now, all he needs is some customers. Here come some of Jimmy's friends. Betty wants to be the first to try out Jimmy's lemonade. And there seem to be 2 more customers. Oh, Jimmy will sell lots of lemonade. But, uh-oh, there's only 1 more glass. Jimmy has 2 glasses and 3 customers. Should he ask them to share the glasses? No, that wouldn't be healthy. You see, there are some things we do not share. Betty has an idea. Wouldn't it be fun if they all shared in the business? Betty could bring some more glasses from her house. Tom could bring a dishpan for washing the glasses, and maybe Ann could get more lemons from her house. If they made this a partnership, then they could all share in the work and the fun of a business. They could make the stand bigger and better, too. But Jimmy doesn't like that idea. He wants to run the lemonade stand alone and have all the fun. Well, if Tom can't have any lemonade, Betty doesn't want any either. Neither does Ann. Of course, it's Jimmy's business. He has a right to decide not to share it. But now there's nothing for him to do but pour the lemonade out and wait for another customer. That isn't much fun, is it? Here's the postman. He and Jimmy are good friends. He'd like to buy some lemonade, but which was the glass Betty used? Jimmy will have to wash the glasses. Will the postman wait? No, he thinks Jimmy needs a partner, someone to share the work. Then his customers wouldn't have to wait. Well, Jimmy did have an offer of help, but Jimmy doesn't want to share his fun and his business. It wouldn't be his anymore. The postman knows that when we share things, there is often more for everybody. Just think of the things we share. We share the sidewalks with others. Automobile drivers share the streets with others. We share schools and churches, parks and playgrounds. Now, how do we share the slide? By taking turns, of course. Here's a top. How could 4 children share it? Why, they could take turns. Then each one would have a chance to spin the top, and they'd all have fun. There are many things we share by taking turns. Some things we share in other ways. How would you share this pie among 4 people? Why, you'd cut it into 4 pieces, 1 for each person. You divide a pie among 4 people. Many things we share by dividing. And there are other ways to share. Every day as we talk to each other, we share knowledge. We share experiences. We share ideas. We share these things by telling others about them. And certainly the postman is sharing by helping people send messages to each other. Yes, there are many, many ways in which sharing with others makes more for everybody. So it's important for Jimmy to think about when to share and how to share. He's also thinking about his lemonade stand and how he hasn't made one sale. Here's another thing for Jimmy to think about. He promised to weed the garden. Well, might as well do it now, since he can't seem to sell any lemonade, and he isn't even having any fun. Perhaps Jimmy should have shared the lemonade stand after all. Then he wouldn't be alone while his friends are having fun. Now Jimmy has an idea about how he can still share with his friends so they'll all have more fun. Jimmy wants to know if Betty and Ann and Tom would like to run the lemonade stand while he finishes weeding the garden. That's a good idea, but Betty thinks they should all share in the fun and share in the work. They can divide up 2 and 2, and then take turns running the stand and pulling weeds. Of course, Jimmy agrees to that. Now that others have shared in fixing up the lemonade stand, it's bigger and better than before. More lemonade, more glasses, and a pan for washing the glasses. What's more, there are customers. Anyone can see that this stand is well run, so it must be a good place to buy lemonade. While Betty and Tom have their turn running the stand, Jimmy and Ann weed the garden. Now the work goes faster, and it's more fun than working alone. Jimmy and Ann pull just about half the weeds. Then, because Betty and Tom want to share alike in the work as well as the fun, they all change places. Now Jimmy and Ann have their turn running the lemonade stand, and everyone is having fun. Sharing with others certainly is a good idea, isn't it? Now the lemonade is nearly gone, and Betty is counting the money the group has earned. What do you suppose they'll do with the money? Don't you think they'll divide it among them? That's the fair thing to do, and that will be sharing again, won't it? Here's Mother, pleased that all the weeds have been pulled, pleased that the lemonade stand has been such a big success. Yes, when Jimmy shared the stand with his friends, and they all shared in the work, then there was more fun for every member of the group. So you learn to share with others. You'll like it. Your friends will like you, too.
Welcome back. Now that you know just how to be thoughtful, we also want you to be nice and not mean and an angry brute. So what we want you to do in this lesson of being considerate is to be pleasant. Be pleasant.
This boy and girl coming home from school look quite content with life. And why not? They're looking forward to an important date, dinner at home with the family. What's the matter? Doesn't that sound exciting to you? Well, to them it's a special occasion, as it has been ever since they sat down to dinner in high chairs. Why should they feel that way about something you take so completely for granted? Well, let's see if we can find out. First of all, daughter has changed from school clothes to something more festive. Dressing a little makes her feel and consequently look more charming. Even the table takes on a special air. Mother, too, changes from her daytime clothes. The women of this family seem to feel that they owe it to the men of the family to look relaxed, rested, and attractive at dinner time. Brother is spending an hour before dinner catching up on his homework. He has plans this evening. Perhaps that explains the telephone call. But he won't spend a lot of time on the phone either. When there are several members of the family to be considered, it is not a good idea for one member to monopolize the phone. And it is never good to allow telephone conversations to interfere with studies. Is it that late? Dad'll be here any minute. Better tell Mother she's needed in the kitchen. Brother notices the time and realizes that he must put things in order and clean himself up in time for dinner. Hello there. Junior is always in a hurry, particularly for dinner. But first there's a cleanup job to do on this young man. Brother takes it upon himself to help share Junior's responsibility for keeping their room in good order and keeping Junior in good order too. Punctuality is stressed in this household. By that I mean hair is combed and faces and hands scrubbed before the boys come to the table so they won't delay the meal. Now, mother and daughter put the finishing touches on the dinner. Father, too, looks forward to this date with the family. He has had a hard day at the office, and in his briefcase are some contracts which must be looked over tonight. But in the meantime, he will relax at dinner with those he loves. A simple centerpiece made from some flowers which grow in the backyard is another of daughter's contributions to the dinner. But it takes up a little too much room, so she moves it to the sideboard. These boys greet their dad as though they are genuinely glad to see him, as though they had really missed being away from him during the day and are anxious to talk to him. This is the time for pleasant discussion in a thoroughly relaxed mood. They don't pick this time of the day to spring unpleasant surprises on Dad. If they have disagreeable news, they'll postpone the discussion until another time. And this is no time to dun Father for a raise in your allowance, new clothes, or argue about other financial matters. Ah, dinner time. Yes, Mother, Junior remembered to clean up. Brother seats Junior. Then helps Mother to her chair as he would his best girl. Well, the dinner date has begun, and they're all happy about it. Many families throughout the country observe the custom of saying grace at mealtime. It is always treated with reverence and respect. Napkins on the lap, the family awaits service. They converse pleasantly while Dad serves. I said pleasantly, for that is the keynote at dinner time. It is not only good manners, but good sense. Pleasant, unemotional conversation helps digestion. Father serves Mother first, then daughter, then the boys. Don't worry, fellas, you won't get left. Help cut your meat, Junior? Of course. By example, older children can teach younger ones good table manners. No one starts eating until Father has served himself. Always wait for the hostess, in this case Mother, to begin eating before you start. Let Father and Mother guide the conversational trend if they desire. After all, they made all this possible and may want to talk over their day with each other. Tell Mother how good the food is. Maybe Sis rates a compliment too. It makes them want to continue pleasing you. Well, all this is good general advice, but there are some specific don'ts. Maybe the family will demonstrate for us. Don't monopolize the conversation and go on and on without stopping. Nothing destroys the charm of a meal more quickly. To say that the rest of the group is bored would be a gross understatement. Don't discuss unpleasant topics such as gruesome sights or sounds or unpleasant occurrences. This is a time of pleasure, of charm and relaxation, remember? Don't make unkind comparisons about your standard of living. The dinner table is no place for discontent. It makes Dad and Mother uncomfortable and unhappy. Don't insult your brother or sister with offensive remarks about friends. Arguments, harsh words mean tension and distress for everyone. Do remember simply this. Treat the other members of your family with the same respect and cordiality you would show your most treasured friend outside the family circle. This does not mean you should be stiff or formal. With your own family, you can relax. Be yourself. Just be sure it's your best self. This is better. Now things are on an even keel again. Now we're ready for dessert. Most families don't have maids, so Mother needs help with the serving from the kitchen. Son says Mother has done enough. Watch him play butler. The removal of dishes from the main course and the serving of dessert set the stage for the conclusion of a thoroughly pleasant meal. Do you begin to see now how a date with your family can be a truly special occasion? Do you know why brother and sister looked forward to the evening? When the dinner hour at home is treated with a certain amount of graciousness and ceremony, it can be memorable. There is no family so poor but that the evening meal can be eaten in an atmosphere of warmth and gentleness. There is no family so busy but that it can come together in the evening for a dinner date which will give its members something to look back upon with happiness all their days.
All right, now that you know how to be pleasant, that pretty much wraps up our episode on how to be considerate. Until next time, I'm Joe Gigliotti, your teacher, your professor, and a PhD. Thank you for watching, keep it simple, and we'll see you next time on How to Live.